At the UN's climate conference, Cop27 this month, the former UK climate minister warned that this year could be the COP where we lose that critical goal of only 1.5 degrees Celsius of global warming. In Scotland tonight, an innovative solution to helping to slow global warming could be lying in a bog. Maggie Rulli traveled to the Scottish Highlands to show us how peat restoration may just be able to save us all.
Nestled in the base of these misty mountains lies a priceless natural resource that's been trapping carbon for thousands of years: peat. And today, this wet, thick mud made up of centuries-old plants is the latest hot ticket for climate investors. The peat we're walking on right now has the potential to make millions. It's the new green rush, with companies and billionaires coming in buying up tens of thousands of acres of this land up here in rural Scotland, restoring it and cashing in on carbon credits. Craft beer company Brewdog is betting on bogs.
If there's a world where nobody lives, then no one's drinking beer in that world. And that's not so good.
Co-founder Martin Dickey takes us into what they've named the Lost Forest, showing us the nearly 10,000 acres of land they bought in northeastern Scotland in 2020.
It's not about your carbon today, it's about your carbon in 10 years' time, in 20 years' time. So it's a long-term, it's a generational play.
Brewdog's first brewery started just a couple hours east of here. They now ship to 55 countries. Restoring this land will help them offset the carbon their company creates, as they also work to reduce the carbon they create in the first place. But for Martin, he says it's about more than carbon credits. He grew up around here.
You don't inherit the land from your ancestors. You're actually looking after it for your children. As business owners, we felt we had the responsibility to start working hard and understanding our emissions from our business, but also doing what we can to help, rewild a little bit of Scotland and do some peat restoration work as well.
He and his team are now working with experts to rewild this land, planting native trees and letting nature take back control, making it look like it did hundreds of years ago, including vast areas of peat bogs. The idea of peat restoration is to make sure that peat bogs stay wet. You can see these black lines are where they've been able to dam up irrigation ditches, and that lets all of the water pool here below, creating a healthy peat bog. And this is eventually what they want the entire area here to become. Because when peat is healthy, it's an environmental powerhouse like none other on Earth. The Amazon is often called the lungs of the planet, but peat traps more carbon than a tropical rainforest, meaning the UK could be sitting on a massive untapped resource. This is the largest blanket peat bog in Europe and one of the largest carbon sinks in the world, because nothing else in nature stores carbon quite like peat. It makes up 3% of the Earth's surface, but holds 30% of its carbon. And 15% of the world's peat is found right here in Scotland, meaning this land could play a major role in trapping carbon and fighting climate change. But peat grows just 1 millimeter a year, about the size of a fingernail. And right now, 80% of it in the UK is damaged.
In good condition, if it's naturally covered, it is one of the best ecosystems in the world for storing carbon. As soon as the soil is exposed to the atmosphere, it starts emitting carbon instead of saving carbon.
Claudia Rouse has worked with the government-backed organization Nature Scot for 20 years. She tells us decades of intensive agriculture, poor irrigation, and a warming planet have turned the country's peat bogs from carbon sinks into carbon sources.
It is so simple. We know how to repair it. Basically, you get a digger and you recover it over.
And the Scottish government has taken notice. The country has some of the most ambitious climate legislation in the world, pledging to become net zero by 2045.
The first milestone we've got to hit is by 2030, we have got to reduce Scotland's emissions by 75%. One of the ways we can do it in the most cost-effective way is through restoring our peatlands.
But Claudia says the government can't do it on their own.
They have earmarked £250 million over the next 10 years to pump prime the start of this peatland restoration. In order to restore all of the peatland in Scotland, which is 1.8 million hectares, 1.8 million soccer fields in other language, we estimate you need several billion pounds of investment. So we're really looking at how the carbon market can help to attract this private investment into Scotland.
Scotland's now become a testing ground for this new global carbon market. Through the government-backed Peatland Action Program, landowners are reimbursed for a portion of their expenses restoring the land. This restored land can then be verified through the UK's Peatland Code to create a carbon credit, which can then be sold to any company looking to offset carbon emissions. But some in Scotland fear this new carbon economy will only benefit foreign elites, leaving local Scots behind.
This has a risk of furthering the inequalities that we already see.
Magnus Davidson's a researcher at the University of the Highlands and Islands in Scotland. He calls today's climate investors green lairds and says it brings back bitter memories of the Scottish clearances starting in the late 1700s. When rich landowners forcibly removed vast amounts of people living on their land to make room for sheep.
What's happened in the clearances continues through to this day with this economic lever that the landowners really have over the landscape.
Today, it's not sheep, it's rising rents that are threatening people's homes.
Land prices are just spiraling out of control because there's so much interest in investment in this land for green purposes.
The amount of money invested in Scottish land doubled last year, climbing to $330 million, with the average price of estate sold in 2021 increasing by 87%.
A just transition is around moving to net zero or a more biodiverse world in a socially just way.
Walking through the lost forest with Martin, he says to just look around, that this nature is bigger than any of us.
All this is going to outlive everyone, so the best thing we can do is kind of put some resource back into it and try and rewild it, and then allow the next generations of scouts and guides and kids to come up here.
And that businesses have a responsibility to step up.
We can't wait another generation and push it down the line and hope that someone else will sort it. So the more people willing to share their experiences, the better everyone can make better decisions in the future and do the things that work and don't do the things that don't work.
A renewed push in this beautiful corner of the planet to preserve nature and our place in it before it's too late.
It's almost as if who knows what's perfect, but at least you're doing something.
At least you're trying, yeah. I think the worst thing you can do is just sit and wait for either for someone else to do the hard work for you or deny it in the first place.